We shall now slide on over to In Dialogue, where our chief host is Mr. Bharat Bhargav. Mr. Bhargav is an internationally renowned figure. Bearing that in mind, through his magical kaleidoscope, this week Mr. Bhargav presents Kaleidoscope of World Cultures. Let's see.
Namaskar. Thanks for joining In Dialogue. Folks, I'm most grateful for the reception you have given to my memoir-based In Dialogue programs. I do have some stuff to share, having had a lot more years to accumulate memories than most of you kind and dear viewers. Today's segment is entitled The Kaleidoscope of World Cultures. I have a term for it, infotainment. As usual, I will use anecdotes to create word pictures and show some actual pictures to give you, especially our younger viewers, the context for the information I'll be sharing. I would also like to let it be known that being in the business of international development, I love dearly each of the countries we have associated with. And nothing I said today should imply anything but my fascination with and admiration for the people and cultures of these countries. There is so much to say about each country, but if I don't limit myself and get carried away, I could be kicked out of here as soon as my 15 minutes are up. So I plan to offer only condensed sprinklings and also to go somewhat rapid fire. You see, we have a micro United Nations within our own family. Our one daughter-in-law, Humaira, is a Bangladeshi American, and I'll pick on her during some other show. Today, I will say something in connection with my second daughter-in-law, Olga, who is a Ukrainian American. When Olga was growing up, her grandmother used to tease her in jest, saying to her, "You're so slim, nobody's going to marry you." Why so, you may ask? Well, in Ukraine and a number of neighboring countries, men are expected to, I must say required, to drink so much during special parties that they would have to go home hanging on their wives' shoulders like this. You could stand in front of a metro station late Saturday nights and would see couple after couple coming up the escalator that way. Women have to be mighty strong for that kind of responsibility. Oh, speaking of escalator in Ukraine, let me tell you another thing. I've been visiting former Soviet Union and Eastern European countries since early 90s. A guy will be and should be a guy when it comes to matters related with girls, but I was most embarrassed about something. What happened is around late 90s, I and my local staffer Varia happened to be standing near the escalator coming up from the underground mall Globus in Kiev. Looking at the stream of shoppers coming up the escalator, something suddenly struck me, and I nearly burst out asking Varia, "Varia, did you realize how beautiful Ukrainian women are?" Her answer was even more startling. She said, "Sir, seeing some of them, even I wonder if they are real people or sculptures." Varia herself is not only beautiful, she has been in the midst of that all her life, and yet she could make that statement spontaneously. Tells you something. Oh, on the matter of drinking that I mentioned before, please know that there is no stigma attached to it there. It is simply a pleasure, totally by societal choice. Many of you may remember once seeing Russia's former president Boris Yeltsin on TV being assisted by his staff because he seemed to have had one too many drinks. I asked a professor in Russia what people thought of that. He told me that Russians have zero problem with it. In fact, it made the citizens feel the president was really one of them. Another time, I was guest of the governor of Khabarovsk Oblast at a dinner when he encouraged me to keep doing bottoms up, saying, "Mr. Bhargava," they pronounce H as Kha. During festive dinner in Russia, we're supposed to keep toasting so often that even a bullet cannot pass through the gap. Many of you folks would have heard the name of a former Soviet Union country called Azerbaijan. Two quick things about that country. The famous story of Laila and Majnu was first written by Nizami Ganjui of Azerbaijan. Majnu's real name was Qais, But people started calling him Majnoon, which means a madman, because he was so crazy about Layla. Second point, the word Azar means fire. There are some fields near the capital, Baku, where flames have been burning eternally. Here's a small patch of it. Hindus and Zoroastrians from India have traveled to Azerbaijan as pilgrims over the centuries for worshipping fire god. The term Atshi Bhagwan was used there over 1,000 years ago. Atshi from Atish, meaning fire, and Bhagwan could have been from Bhagwan or the Russian word for God, Bog. There is also a large ancient fire temple there called Atishgah, Gah meaning place, which has large marble plaques with writings in Devanagari and Persian. Look at this. By the way, Azerbaijan, along with Georgia and Armenia, formed the region called Caucasus, the source of the race named Caucasian. Let's go to Philippines for a bit. I have found that Filipinos have a hard time saying no to anything you ask them. I went to a department store in Manila to buy a suitcase. There were two similar looking suitcases, but the black one that I preferred was $30 more expensive than the brown one. I asked this young lady, hey, can I not get the black one for the same price? I was sort of kidding as I was trying to make up my own mind. Remember, this was a department store, not a private shop. But she walked over to the cash register and proceeded to ring the sale while saying to me, I'm not supposed to sell it for that price. I didn't know whether to say, then why are you doing it? Or let her proceed. Hey, can you imagine being able to generalize about the people of any country that they do not get angry? I can. For the people of Thailand, there are some more intricate details to this matter, but suffice it to say, it is very difficult to make a Thai person angry. Interesting, isn't it? It might also interest you to know that historically the capital of Thailand used to be a city called Ayutthaya, their variation for Ayodhya, until it got destroyed in a war. And for the last 250 years, each of the Thai kings have been called Rama. The current one is Rama the Ninth. In that connection, I was intrigued to find a huge temple of Sitaji in Sri Lanka where Ashok Vatika used to be, as described in Ramayana. And Janakpuri also still exists in Nepal, very near its border with India. Oh, as an aside, when I spoke to a particular cashier at one of the grocery stores in this area, I said to myself, wait a minute, something is wrong here. The lady was pleasant and smiling, and I said, what's the matter with her? You know how it is. When there are a lot of customers swarming around, any attendant can seem stressed and gruff. Oh, but not the Nepalese. Now I know better. Well, all that talk about Ramayana brings me to thinking about India. India, a cultural kaleidoscope of kaleidoscopes. To my viewers, even the mention of any of the words like Indian music, dances, Bollywood, architecture, clothes, jewelry, festivals, weddings, cuisine including mithais, literature, philosophy, and scriptures is enough to transport them into cultural ecstasy. Maybe I'll show you a telling picture or two at the end. For now, I'd like to mention for our younger viewers that the word Mughal in India came from the name of the country called Mongolia. And the race name Mongoloid literally means resembling Mongols. You see, Mongolia is a very cold country. In fact, the capital, Ulaanbaatar, is known as the coldest national capital in the world. Although it snows very little, a subject for another day. Even so, for thousands of years, Mongolians have lived in a portable, round sort of hut with thick felt insulation around it called ger. Sounds so much like ghar. The well-known Russian word for them is yurt. Even 40% of people in Ulaanbaatar still live in yurts. The interiors of yurts are colorful, they have a lot of ornamentation, and the ceiling crown in some of them have Buddha's Dharma Chakra, given the majority of Mongolians are Buddhists. By the way, a surprising 40% of Mongolians are atheists. Very interesting, the yurts have invisible partition walls for sections for men, women, children, and the family as a whole. I was invited by the chairman of one of the Mongol banks that our people had been advising. Given his position, of course, he was very well-to-do and had a house. But I was surprised to see that he had given space to his not-so-well-to-do brother, whose family lived in a yurt right on the yard. Oh, by the way, Genghis Khan ruled his entire empire 900 years ago from his yurt. One time, a friend of mine had brought two officials from another very cold country, Belarus, to my place. I offered to drive them back to their hotel in Washington. The hotel was on the left side of the street, so once we reached across from the hotel, they got out of the car and then suddenly ran across the street to their hotel without as much as saying so long to me. I was puzzled and simply drove back. Soon I got a call from them apologizing for what had happened. You see, it was August and close to 100 degrees here that day, and they explained to me that it was so unbearable for them when they got out of the car that they could not even stand for a second. Speaking of heat, because it's very hot in Egypt during the day, craftsmen working on shell-inlaid tables and other crafts have their stores open until 1 or 2 a.m. or later. I used to be able to go to any remotest alley, even dark alleys of Cairo, even with my wife, never having any security concerns. I must admit, Egypt feels like me are saddened by the turn of events there and pray to God for things to get better. We all know how prosperous another Arab place, Abu Dhabi, is. Its per capita income is among the highest in the world, close to that of the US. I will startle you by telling you that only a generation or so ago, the citizens of Abu Dhabi suffered from dreadful poverty, hunger, misery, and hardship. Fish and banana were sort of their main food. About once a month, Indian ships would bring rice, and that would be a huge deal for them. There was not much of an economy, but they used Indian rupee as their currency. Men folk were forced to do pearl diving under very harsh conditions or do fishing. And women, they would sell fish sitting on hot desert before the fish would rot. Now, with the discovery of oil, the same women, if they want to do clothes shopping, they don't have to go to a store. The store will come to their home with truckloads of racks. The founding president of Abu Dhabi, the visionary late His Highness Sheikh Zayed bin Sultan Al Nahyan, used to be their tribal leader in the past. By the way, if you go to the airport of the neighboring emirate, Dubai, you will be greeted like this.
Welcome to Dubai International Airport. Please proceed straight ahead to board the train for B and C gates. If you need any further information, please proceed to the nearest information zone.
Speaking of airports, can you figure out what the red sentence in this sign means? This sign has been in the restrooms of Istanbul airport for a long time. I have not been able to figure out the message. Please let me know if you can. Pakistan. Many of the things I have said about India apply to Pakistan as well and are well known to my viewers. I've also shared some heartwarming personal anecdotes from Pakistan on my shows before. So today I will simply add, by celebrating one cultural aspect of Pakistan, the fact that you would find incredible ghazal and other genres of music simply in the air in Pakistan. In the neighboring Afghanistan, I found that while the management people I met are every bit as suave and sophisticated as anywhere else, but in the context of culture, I found that the everyday folks of Afghanistan are just as large-hearted, sweet, and simple as Abdur Rahman Khan was in the film Kabuliwala. Let me tell you one more thing. Have a great day.